Have you ever felt like the smarter you become, the more out of place you feel in the world? Like the deeper you think, the harder it is to connect with the people around you? If so, you're not alone. And the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer might have the answer to why that is. He once wrote, "The more a man belongs to posterity, in other words, to humanity in general, the more of an alien he is to his contemporaries." In other words, the further your mind travels, the harder it is to find people who understand the journey. Think about it. How often have you tried to explain an idea you care about, only to be met with blank stares or dismissive nods? You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, but also the loneliness that comes with it. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they make the world feel safe and predictable. But Schopenhauer believed that true intelligence often means seeing beyond what's comfortable. And that can leave you feeling isolated. Remember when you were a kid and you realized Santa Claus wasn't real? That moment when something you believed deeply turned out to be an illusion. Schopenhauer would say that adulthood is full of those moments, except instead of Santa, it's the beliefs we have about success, happiness, and even other people. The more you question, the more you see how much of life is built on assumptions. And that's where the tension begins. Our instincts want us to fit in, to go along with the crowd, because for most of human history, being part of the group meant survival. But our deeper awareness, the part that asks why, can't always accept those easy answers. Schopenhauer called this the struggle between the will, our blind, driving desires, and the intellect, our ability to step back and see clearly. The smarter you are, the more that conflict grows. You start to see the contradictions in what people say, the hidden motives behind their actions, and the illusions they cling to for comfort. But here's the thing. This isn't just about being smarter than others. It's about seeing more, and that vision comes with a cost. You might notice how often people pretend to be happy when they're not, or how society rewards conformity over truth. You might see through the games people play, status, flattery, even friendship sometimes, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's why Schopenhauer believed the most intelligent people often feel like outsiders. They're not deluding themselves the way others do, and that honesty creates distance. So what do you do when you start to feel this way? First, understand that it's not a flaw. It's a sign of a mind that won't settle for easy answers. Second, recognize that loneliness isn't always a bad thing. Schopenhauer saw solitude as the price of clarity, and sometimes being alone is better than being surrounded by people who force you to pretend. But here's the hopeful part. You're not really alone. There are others who see the world the way you do, even if they're rare. And the more you accept that feeling of being different, the more you can turn it into strength. Instead of resenting the crowd for not understanding, you can focus on the ideas and people that do resonate with you. This cracks open a truth we often overlook. The smarter you are, the more alone you might feel. It's not because intelligence pushes people away, but because seeing the world differently can make you feel out of step with everyone else. We start life seeing things simply. As kids, the rules are clear. Share your toys, be kind, follow the grown-ups. Life makes sense in broad strokes, and fitting in feels natural. But then comes the confusing middle, when the simplicity starts to unravel. You notice contradictions. People say one thing, but do another. Or you realize that the rules you trusted don't always apply. This is where the unease creeps in, where you might feel like an outsider in your own life. The middle phase is messy because it's where we confront Schopenhauer's idea of the will, the blind driving force behind human behavior. He saw that most people operate on impulse, reacting to life without much reflection. But if you're someone who pauses, who questions, you'll start to see the gaps between what people say and what they actually want. You might be someone who resists change at first, clinging to the old simplicity because it's comfortable. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions, especially when we realize that fitting in might mean silencing parts of ourselves. This is where the knee-jerk reactions clash with thoughtful responses. Schopenhauer believed that the majority of people live in a state of constant reaction, like leaves blown by the wind. They don't stop to ask why they're angry, why they want what they want, or why they follow certain norms. But if you're the type to reflect, you'll catch yourself pausing before reacting lately. You'll notice the tension between going along with the crowd and staying true to your own insights. It's uncomfortable, but it's also where growth happens. The tough middle phase is where Schopenhauer's view of challenges really hits home. He argued that struggle isn't just inevitable, it's necessary. Like a muscle that only grows when stressed, your mind only sharpens when it grapples with contradictions. You might feel isolated, but that isolation is what forces you to think for yourself. We start noticing how often people operate on autopilot, repeating slogans or following trends without questioning them. And if you're someone who can't ignore those inconsistencies, it's easy to feel like you don't belong. But then comes the new clarity. Slowly, you begin to see that the discomfort was never a flaw. It was a sign of a mind that refuses to take things at face value. You realize that the loneliness you felt wasn't because you were broken, but because you were seeing more than others could. Schopenhauer called this the burden of genius. But you don't have to be a genius to experience it. Anyone who thinks deeply will face moments of alienation. The difference is in how you respond. Do you shrink back, or do you lean into the clarity that comes with seeing the world as it really is? We all want to belong, but the price of fitting in is often self-betrayal. The more you understand, the harder it becomes to pretend. You might catch yourself smiling at a joke you don't find funny, or nodding along to an idea you don't believe, just to keep the peace. But over time, those small compromises add up, and the gap between you and the world grows wider. Schopenhauer knew this tension well. He saw that most people would rather be comfortable than right, and that the few who choose truth over comfort will always feel out of place. Yet there's a quiet strength in this realization. When you stop expecting the world to make sense on the surface, you start finding meaning in deeper connections. You appreciate the rare conversations where you don't have to explain yourself, the moments when someone else sees what you see. These are the people who make the loneliness worth it, the ones who remind you that you're not alone in feeling alone. The journey from simplicity to confusion to clarity isn't a straight line. It's more like a spiral. You keep circling back to the same questions, but each time with a little more understanding. You might be someone who resists change at first, but eventually you learn to trust the process. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions, but it's in those uneasy moments that we grow. Through this discomfort, we begin to see the cracks in what we once thought was solid ground. It's unsettling, like realizing the map you've been following is missing key landmarks. But here's the thing, those cracks let in light. They show us where we've been clinging to ideas or habits that no longer serve us, where we've been wearing someone else's version of our life, like an ill-fitting coat. And while it's tempting to patch those cracks quickly, to smooth over the uncertainty, there's something far more valuable in pausing to look closer. This is where the real work begins. Not the kind of work that exhausts us, but the quiet, internal kind that feels like untangling a knot we didn't even know was there. You might notice it in small ways at first. A decision that once would have left you agonizing now feels clearer, or an old frustration that used to simmer for days now rolls off your back. These shifts are subtle, but they're signs. The Barnum effect tells us we'll naturally see ourselves in vague descriptions, but this isn't about vague truths. It's about recognizing the very real changes that come when we stop forcing ourselves into shapes that don't fit. As we move through this, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking we're alone in the struggle. But the truth is, everyone carries some version of this weight. The difference lies in who's willing to examine it. Together, we discover that growth isn't about becoming someone entirely new, but about shedding the layers that obscure who we've always been. It's like cleaning a window. The view was always there, but now we can see it clearly. And here's the beautiful part. The more we practice this, the more natural it becomes. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier, not because life gets simpler, but because you're no longer working against yourself. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much, not because the world changes, but because their relationship to it does. It's not magic, it's alignment. When we stop contorting ourselves to meet outdated expectations, we create space for what actually matters. This journey isn't linear. There are days when the old patterns feel safer, when the discomfort of growth seems too heavy. But even in those moments, there's progress. Every time we choose to listen to our own voice over the noise of should and supposed to, we reinforce a deeper trust in ourselves. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything else. Arthur Schopenhauer once described freedom as finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. That's what this feels like, a release, a homecoming to ourselves. Together, we discover that the most profound changes often come from the simplest realizations, that we were never meant to wear those shoes in the first place. And so we keep going, not because we've arrived, but because the path itself has become lighter. The weight we thought was ours to carry turns out to have been borrowed all along. And in letting it go, we find something unexpected. Not just relief, but a quiet joy in the ordinary moments, the ones that used to slip by unnoticed. This is the gift of waking up to our own lives. It's not flashy or dramatic, but it's real. And that's more than enough.